Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Is therapy the quickest way to success? Let's ask our guest, Robert Grigore, author of You Need Therapy. Robert, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Bill. Appreciate it.
Now, Robert, you sought out your book, You Need Therapy, by saying people are stuck living as a reaction to problems. Can you explain that a little further to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I find that so many people that come in to see me, and also in my personal life too, that by being a trauma therapist, focusing on the particular underlying currents of negative belief system and holding people back. I'm noticing that so many people that come to see me, they want to be successful. They want to have a loving relationship, a loving marriage. They want to have all the good things that we're looking for in life. And yet there's these particular negative belief systems that are holding people back. And not as many people as I'd hope would know exactly where all of that is coming from, the roots of what's actually holding them back. So I wrote the book so that people can understand what is trauma, how are you being affected by trauma, and I think that everybody's a trauma survivor. Put that out there, and so I think that's extremely important, and that's why one of the reasons why I wrote it.
Now, and you point out to us, your book is called You Need Therapy, but you're really looking at this from a success viewpoint, or at least the way I read the book, because you say we're saddled with negative beliefs and are stuck repeating the same old patterns. And to be honest with you, as soon as I read that, I said, oh my gosh, this is what I see with so many people, with so many friends, professional friends, etc., and myself. Yeah. And so can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to tell you a story about a client that I'm going to call Tony. He came in to see me, and this guy was absolutely, he came in dressed to the nines. He was absolutely a huge company, like 500 people company. And, he comes in with the belief system, that he is successful. Yet he comes in and he says, Robert, I'm just, people think that I'm such a mean guy. And I'm struggling with this pattern of anger. Like, I will just explode on anybody at a moment's notice. And we're talking, you get into a cab and, he just wants to go across the street. The cab takes him left instead of right, and he'll just explode. And imagine what that was doing to his intimate relationships with his wife, with his son. And, so this is a pattern that's holding him back. It's holding him back from negotiating with clients, because if somebody says something that was triggering for him, he would explode. So this is a classic example of those negative patterns of self-sabotaging patterns that are continuing to repeat themselves. And he's just one of many, 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 many people. Think about addictions that I see people struggling with. Alcohol or drugs or gambling or sex or whatever that particular pattern is, these are slowing us down. It's like having it's like you're in a hot air balloon and you want to take off for success, and you've got all these weights, these saddlebags that are just holding you down, and people don't realize you can snip that off and you can fly way, way faster.
As you're saying that, that's the cover of your next book. Seriously, I could see the balloon going up and someone clipping off the weights that are holding them back from success. And again, personally, I've seen this with people, and you make no bones about it. You start out telling us about your early life, and you were overweight, you were kind of lonely, you felt you were the kid left out. If you want to tell our audience a little more about that. So,
yeah, I'm happy to. It's my story, but it's not probably that unique I'm sure a lot of people have experienced similar childhoods especially clients that I've seen come in to see me. I struggled as an overweight kid. I had I was a heavy set boy, and I was an only child, so I always felt lonely. And I had addictions before I even knew what they were. I was struggling with anxiety and depression before I even knew what they were. And I was bullied in school. And, my nickname was Short Fat with Glasses. That's what I was told. So what happens is, I came from also a pretty okay family household. My parents gave me everything that I needed. I had clothes on my back. I had food that I needed to eat. I had, the stuff. I even got the first car that I wanted. So, money wasn't, extravagant, but it wasn't lacking. So I had all this stuff, but I wasn't getting the emotional guidance. And so when I was bullied by people in my school, I started to adopt those belief systems that I was indeed short, fat with glasses. And my belief system became, I am worthless. It became that I'm not worthy. It became that I don't belong. And those belief systems carried with me my entire life up until I decided to change them. And so it was like pushing that boulder. If you're Sisyphus, you remember that Greek mythology, pushing that boulder up the hill is just constantly being pushed back down, because you get so far, then all of a sudden I would get, some triggering event would happen, and I would begin to fall back down to the beginning of that mountain. And I would just, be feeling everything that comes in with feeling I'm not worthy, and I'm not good enough. So definitely was something that I struggled with my whole life. And there's a lot of people that have some kind of similar, emotional neglect, or even something far worse.
Now, you tell us that you've experienced this. We know a lot of people, and we can see it in our friends. And you kind of look to something called EMDR. Am I correct in saying that?
That is right.
And,
yes.
And it's used by initials, so that's the way it's expressed. And yet, when you explain to us what those words actually mean, to me, it's very confusing, because it made me think that you're going to diagnose me by how often I blink my eyes or how I look at you, and it's really something totally different. Am I also correct?
You are totally correct, and I have not heard that one yet, Bill. But that's a good one. We got to do something about that, don't we? So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And as you can tell, it's a mouthful, so we just use EMDR, the acronym. And what that is, it's an accelerated form of neurological processing. It's a whole therapy approach, and there's nothing invasive. There's no counting eye blinks. But what we're doing is we're accessing earlier trauma that's at the root cause for any of the things that we're suffering with: anxiety, depression, addiction, trauma, negative patterns that are repeating. And we're finding the root cause of where all of that came from. And how it's stored in the brain is anytime we have a traumatic incident that we experience, and it's very overwhelming, as trauma is. And trauma could be anything from a car crash to neglect as a child, emotional neglect. And how that's stored in the brain is stuck on the right side, essentially, and you can't access all of it, and you become triggered. And we need something different than talk therapy. And we can't just talk about our problems, because it's actually going to trigger us more to relive those problems again. And so EMDR does something called bilateral stimulation, where we're activating the left hemisphere and then the right hemisphere in alternating fashion, so that we can transfer that information from the right side over to the left side, and vice versa.
I'm going to laugh at you and say that you cleared that up. Now that I know all I have to do is stimulate my bilaterals, that's much easier than EMDR. So, and it sounds like you're setting us up for a couple of massive sessions. And yet I know from your book, this is actually a very seemingly quick method compared to, we often hear about people going to therapy for years to find out that they hated their mother, or their dog wasn't nice to them or something. Mm-hmm. So the EMDR method, which again has nothing to do, as I mistakenly thought, with eye blinking or reprocessing how quickly we view a situation, it's really totally different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just a note on the name. It was developed with eyes moving back and forth by Dr. Francine Shapiro back in 1987, and all the research up until I think the first decade was all on eye movements, and then afterwards we noticed that we can tap our legs back and forth, or we can use audio tones clicking back and forth. But to get to your point about the speed, and that's really what drew me to EMDR and why I started using it. I was a therapist, a talk therapist. After I was a talk therapy client, and I spent myself personally 4+ years in talk therapy. And I got to tell you, every single time I was finished with my session, I went to the closest bar to have a drink.
And that's when you became an alcoholic. Okay, now we get to the book.
Yeah, the next book, exactly. So I thought that's how therapy was supposed to be done, though. And I grew up, listening or reading books on, Freud, of course, and Carl Jung and Irving Yalom and all the greats. And I thought of therapy as this, 10-year plus thing. I would be invited to, my clients' children's weddings or something like that. And it would be like this beautiful legacy, this saga. But then, as a talk therapist working with male survivors of sexual abuse, people that are very, very traumatized, and I was just talking with them, and while providing a great space for us to have a conversation, for them to feel heard and seen, what actually seemed to happen is we were both burning out in the process. They loved talking with me. I loved my clients. It was wonderful, but it felt like taking a spoon to take down a redwood tree. It was taking forever. And so I needed something different. So I just remembered off the off chance and somewhere in the back of my mind, hearing about this EMDR thing in my master's education, that, I thought I would use that if I have somebody that's really stuck. I would send them to an EMDR therapist. I go into my first training, and Bill, I got to tell you, I listened to the instructor. His name was Marshall, and I thought this was completely bogus. He was talking about healing people in hours versus years, and I thought, well, this is baloney. I'm going to get up and leave before the lunch break, And then I thought, I'm paying all this money for the training. I'm just going to be some credits for my degree, my college. I might as well just stay. Best decision I made in a long time. For my career, I was able to take people that were struggling. One of my clients was a survivor of a molestation when he was a young child, and we've been speaking for over 2 years. I did a few EMDR sessions with him, and that was 90 minutes. And by the end of that third or fourth session, he said, "You know what, Robert? I could probably run into my abuser in the mall and actually have a conversation with him." He prefaced, he said, I probably wouldn't be friends with him or do business with him or anything, but I could probably have a conversation with him.
Robert, before we go further, I want our audience to know that if they're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Robert Grigore. He's the author of You Need Therapy. And Robert, I'd ask you to tell our audience, because I'm sure they're fascinated as they're hearing this, where can we get the book, and is there a website we can learn more?
Yeah, for sure. So there is, you can go to any of your Amazons, amazon.com.ca, in the UK as well. Basically anywhere that you can find books, it's there. And you can also get a free sample on my website at grigorecounseling.com. And there's a website as well that's launching shortly, younedtherapybook.com.
And the great part of this is, when I'm reading, not only does it work, but it works quickly. And you would think for you, it's either going to mean you're going to have 6 weeks off or 6 months off each year because you're doing your work too quickly, or you're going to cut your income in half. But you make it up by writing books and telling the rest of us about it, so that's okay. But it really is interesting. And again, if it works for people, and it seems simple enough, it's not something they have to get engaged in for 3 years before they find out it's not working or it's not for them. I think at the basis of, if I'm reading this correctly, there are some core beliefs that we come through life with that come from traumatic experiences. Can you tell us, without using obviously a patient's name, for instance, what you would see in some patient and what that would, what belief would lead you to treating him or her with the EMDR?
Yeah. I talk about Brenda often. She's a past client of mine, and such a great story. She came in. She, just to set the stage a little bit, she's a fairly successful business owner in the healthcare field, and she, had a small practice, 5 people in her clinic, and brilliant woman, just top of her class and everything. And she comes to me and she says, "Robert, I'm really struggling with this addiction, and I want to be more successful. I want to have a happy relationship." And she comes in to see me thinking that she needs to work on the addiction. And of course, that's an important piece. But pretty quickly, in my first consultation session that I have with my client, I recognized that the addiction stemmed from her feeling that she wasn't worthy of love. She was part of one of these high-achieving families where it felt like in order to get love, she had to be perfect. She had to be better than her siblings. And this is one of the major belief systems that will hold people back in life is that I'm not worthy of love. Another one is that I don't matter, that I'm not enough. All of these were some of the beliefs that Brenda had. And when we healed through EMDR, in a very rapid succession, we did it in a weekend. We healed. I'm not worthy of love, and she actually felt, oh my God, not to sound narcissistic, but she was falling in love with herself. She was like, I am amazing. Holy crap! I didn't think that was that great. So she then goes back into her business with this new confidence. The addiction was no longer there, and she was actually able to work on her team so that they respected her more because she actually, trimmed the fat, if you will. She took out one of the employees that was undermining her, and in a very loving and compassionate way, and had the whole team look at her differently. So, you come in for one thing and you get like 3 or 4 other benefits out of it. So it was just an amazing story.
And Robert, I just want our audience to know, obviously they can hear you. I'm looking at you, and you're a very soothing person, so I think you get your message across professionally, but on a low-key basis, which to me I respect more than the yeller and the screamer who is, selling me the red car with a lot of balloons, and neither the balloons or the car work. Are people amazed that this gets results in 2 to 3 sessions, sometimes even less, like this lady you talked about?
Yeah, it's one of the challenges is people have been growing up in our society thinking that therapy needs to be sometimes a 2-decade, 3-decade lifetime endeavor, and then when somebody comes in there and say, "Robert, I've been struggling for 20 years with this particular issue, and you're telling me 2 to 3 sessions it could be lifted? Are you kidding me?" And of course, people are going to be skeptical, right? But it's extremely just organic. It's a biological thing that's happening in the brain, and 30 plus years of research that backs it up. So really, what happens is after that first day that they're working with me, they're going to start to see some improvements, and that's the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
And I like that you bring out also, it's obviously we're talking about success, but success in life. And sometimes this is a relationship. It might be just finding that right partner who makes the day worthwhile and the weekend something to look forward to, or a good friend. I don't mean a romantic partner, even a good friend to spend some time with or enjoy, whether it's playing cards, fishing, golf, or hunting, whatever your hobbies or sports are. So you're opening it up to more things than just, it's not monetary success necessarily or getting promoted to vice president. There's a lot more options. Robert, once again, I'd like to tell our audience that if you're just tuning in, and I think this is important, I'd urge you to write it down because you're going to be talking to a friend. And what was the name of that book? Who was that author? Well, we're going to tell you in a few seconds. You're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan, but the person you want to remember is Robert Grigore. That's spelled Grigore. He's the author of the book You Need Therapy. It's a relatively simple book. I don't think it's even 100 pages. If it is, maybe a few more or less. Robert, where can we get the book, and where is that website where we could find out more information?
Yeah, you can get the book on anywhere that you buy books, Amazon, for example, and you can get a free sample of the first chapter or so on my website at grigorecounseling.com.
And once again, I will ask you that before the end of the show, so I urge our audience, if you think this might apply to your friend, your daughter, your neighbor, your sister's child, just take the information down. It's not going to hurt. You're going to be talking to them and say, what's that guy's name? What was the name of his book? It's only 3 words. You need therapy. I keep saying it, but I want people to remember it. So now let me ask you, the word therapy, and I said this to you before the show, has a connotation like, oh, if I need therapy, there must be something wrong with me. I advise you to say you need success, and everybody would buy the book then. But do you find that that's something that, are people a little timid about that?
Yeah, that's a good point. To be honest, I heard that growing up too. I heard that line of thinking that if I go see a therapist, I even heard that from one of my parents about a couple years ago. What, you must be really screwed up that you're in therapy. And to be honest, it's something that I want the world to shift. I want this to be the stigma that lifts. I believe it's beginning to be so. Particularly in North America, is starting to change, and it's almost one of those things where people become proud of being in therapy. So it's definitely not something to shy away from, and I want people to think about it, that it doesn't have to be a life sentence. It can be over very, very quickly, and you're going to be empowered to such a far greater degree. And what you're saying before about success in every area of your life, everything's so interconnected. If you're going through a divorce and your personal life is going through a major struggle, it's going to be very difficult to have that conversation with the board and focus and really deliver that new product or whatever it is that you're pitching. So I really want people to think about therapy as an opportunity to heal all areas of life, not just particularly your early childhood with mom and dad or something like that. It can be every part of your life.
Now, Robert, what about someone who says, well, I use positive affirmations, and certainly not, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I'm a positive thinker and I know this is going to work out. I'm going to meet Mr. Right or Miss Right, and I'm going to get that promotion. What's your response to that?
Hey, I'm all for positive thinking. I think that's hopefully that's actually the default that we will go to. However, when we have these positive beliefs, things like I am successful, I will belong, I am worthy of love. If we believe those, we only repeat them, daily, a couple times a day, which is what I hear so many positive affirmation gurus preaching. That's great. And keep doing that. But as you do that, notice if there's a part of your mind that doubts the truth of that statement. So if there's a part of your mind, if you're trying to tell yourself, you know what, Robert, I am successful. And if there's a part of your mind that says, yeah, but how about that one time when that thing happened over there, or you could be doing better comparative to this other person. Or if you think, I do belong, that's my statement I want to believe. And then you actually think, yeah, but I'm not really feeling like those particular people accept me, or if I'm getting criticism from that group of people. Then what we're talking about is there's actually negative belief systems that are holding back the speed of those positive affirmations coming to fruition. It becomes like that. It's like Sisyphus pushing that boulder up the hill again. Like, just know I'm worthy of love. I just know it. I have to be. But then there's a part of you, unless you do the work, and it can be done quickly, unless you do that, you're going to have that boulder fall back on you eventually. And every time it falls, it can hurt more and more. So it's got to be something that you take a true stand and you're ready to actually shift this once and for all.
Now, Robert, what are some of the traumas you see that people come in with? And maybe even we don't use the word trauma. I wouldn't count that as a trauma. It just happened two or three times with me and my mom, or my dad and myself, or sister, etc. Can you give us an overview? Because the person you talked about seemed to have a great life. They came to you. You said they were a brilliant person, a lovely person, and they went back and actually changed their business life based on what you said. So what are some of the traumas you see?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, when we talk about traumas, there's a big T trauma, which is obvious, car crash, sexual assault, terrorist bombing. Those are clearly traumatic. But then there's the small T traumas, and those are the things like little Jimmy that comes home from school, went back when we could go to school.
The good old days.
The good old days. Comes back. Look at this. Look at this grade. I got an A+ on my test. Comes to daddy, and dad's busy on his computer, and barely even looks up to acknowledge little Jimmy. And what does little Jimmy now believe about himself in that moment? Oh, maybe I don't matter. His computer matters more. So if that happens one time or two times, probably not a big deal. But if that happens every single time little Jimmy comes over and wants to show off something that he's doing, and he's met with this, complacent response, this neglectful, emotional response, he's going to take that to heart. So that's something. Other things could be moving around a lot, never forming solid relationships that last. It could be things like being humiliated at school, picked on at school. Like for me, for example, I was never picked. I was always picked last for sports because I was a heavy kid.
Me too.
Okay. A lot of people have been, right? And, what do I learn? Okay, I'm not good at sports. Okay, I don't belong. I'm not good enough. These are all the beliefs. So that happens over and over and over again. These start to really set in as your identity, your belief system about yourself.
Now, Robert, if someone came to you, and obviously you can't give away everything or even get it in the next 30 seconds or 50 seconds, but what should they expect? Are you going to hold a watch that goes back and forth and hypnotize them? Are they going to start at day one? What do they remember from being born, and what was the first milk they drank in the hospital, etc.?
Close, but not exactly. Yeah, no, it's not hypnotherapy. There's some similarities. Classically there was a hand moving back and forth. Now everything's online, so it's virtual. So you'll be following a ball moving back and forth, and that just allows your eyes to move to left to right, so that we can access both sides of the brain. Your left side of the brain is connected to the right eye, and so on. And so we're going to follow that negative belief system wherever it goes. And oftentimes it will go far back, but the brain's only going to bring up necessary information for you that it needs to process because it wants to heal.
And you make that so simple. What, in terms of a time period, what should someone expect if they come in to see you? Is it, I know you said a couple of sessions, but is it a month? Is it 3 sessions over a year, or 10 sessions over a week?
Yeah, great question. For me, I'm a little different than the regular EMDR therapist that's out there. So for me, I will be working on somebody for an entire weekend. It'll be 15 hours. And it doesn't have to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, with 3 days in a row. And we're going to eliminate that core negative belief system that's holding the person back. And then we're going to follow up with that person periodically throughout the rest of that month. And then I also do that for three whole months, where I then help the person integrate what's changed over with that weekend. So the bulk of the treatment happens in just 3 days. And then we're just helping his or her world move to fit with that new change.
What I'm hearing, if we can't spare parts of 2 or 3 days, we may not really want to be successful. And boy, if it means finding that right friend in life, partner, job, etc., I think I'd like to spend a little time with you. I want our audience, before we wrap up, to know the book is You Need Therapy. It's by our guest, Robert Grigore, spelled Grigore, and the website real quick.
GrigoreCounseling.com.
Easy enough to remember. Robert, thanks so much for being with us. I'd like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.